Urgent! An assassination attempt on Putin in the bunker. The dictator's fear and a bloody coup in the Kremlin. Almost 200 days underground. How the president of Russia set a record for isolation and why he is afraid to appear before people. On top of that, there is the fear of drones. Putin even stopped going to Valdai after threats from Ukrainian UAVs, and the body doubles are already at work. British intelligence has confirmed what Moscow tried so hard to hide, and now total paranoia. Vladimir Putin, in a panic, is purging the Kremlin of his own generals and officials. He senses that the elites are preparing to strike. Who among his own will deliver the fatal blow to his back? Greetings, this is the channel Ukraine Today, about Putin's animalistic fear and his imminent elimination right now. My name is Andrei Selikov, and let's begin. The Russian dictator apparently has trapped himself in a deep paranoid snare. An animal fear for his own life has driven Vladimir Putin to set an absolute record for reclusiveness. He has not stepped foot outside of his private residence for a total of 196 days in a row. This isolation has surpassed even the strictest restrictions of the coronavirus era, when the dictator hid for 132 days. Now he has fully confirmed his status as a bunker grandpa, who is in a panic-stricken fear of his own people and doesn't even dare to stick his nose out into the regions of Russia.
In the years before the full-scale war in Ukraine, he would stay put for a maximum of 45 to 60 days, and after the invasion, this number was about 50 days.
And the reason for this total fear is obvious. Putin is terrified to the point of trembling at the news of successful Ukrainian drone attacks and the inevitable assassination attempt from his own elites. According to Western intelligence, after receiving information about a possible attack on his residence in Valdai, the dictator stopped going there altogether, hiding himself away in the deepest, most secure underground bunkers.
At the end of 2025, the Russian authorities claimed that Ukraine had attempted to attack Putin's residence in Valdai. Although Western leaders, particularly Donald Trump, expressed doubts about the truthfulness of these claims, sources close to the Kremlin assert that the dictator took the threat extremely seriously. According to leaks from Western intelligence that appeared in the media in early May, Putin stopped going to Valdai altogether. At present, he is working in secure bunkers, and the Federal Protective Service, FSO, has once again taken unprecedented measures to strengthen his personal security.
And in order to create the illusion of a strong leader's presence, the Kremlin is forced to use an entire staff of specially trained body doubles. Former head of British intelligence Richard Dearlove has openly confirmed what Ukrainian special services have been saying for a long time.
According to Dearlove, for a leader of this level, the use of body doubles is almost a standard element of protection, especially after the start of the full-scale war against Ukraine, when the security risks for the Kremlin increased significantly. Kyiv has consistently and repeatedly demonstrated its ability to strike deep inside Russian territory, which significantly heightens the Kremlin's concerns about Putin's personal safety and vulnerability, especially when he is outdoors or in loosely controlled environments. This is stated in an article by The Sun.
Meanwhile, while the doubles wave their hands at the camera, the real dictator, apparently in fits of paranoia, is carrying out bloody purges within his inner circle. According to media reports, Putin is maniacally cleaning out the upper echelons, dismissing yesterday's favorites, generals and high-ranking officials.
The Kremlin may also be trying to divert discontent in the border regions away from Putin and the ruling United Russia Party ahead of the State Duma elections, which are scheduled to take place in September this year. Gladkov has also openly criticized the shutdown of mobile internet and telegram in the border area of Belgorod region. The Kremlin may have replaced Gladkov with someone it considers more loyal to itself, the ISW report states.
But these desperate attempts to save themselves only hasten the inevitable end. The Russian elites, it seems, are already fully prepared for a palace coup. As military experts note, Putin's inner circle secretly hates him for destroying their luxurious lives, depriving them of their money, and turning them into global pariahs. And it seems the bunker grandpa has become toxic dead weight, dragging the entire elite down with him. The elimination of the deranged dictator is no longer a question of probability. It is now solely a matter of time and choosing the right moment.
Putin will die by his own inner circle and then be blamed for everything. Just look at the latest statements from Sergei Shoigu, Russia's Security Council secretary. He has identified those responsible for the current tragedy and for the Russian people, Yuri Fedorenko emphasized. Against the backdrop of protracted hostilities, a virtual deadlock in negotiations, and increasingly painful sanctions, President Vladimir Putin is facing declining support and growing public discontent, particularly due to the worsening economic situation and restricted access to the internet.
According to experts, the scenario of physical elimination is already on the table for those who want to preserve at least some remnants of their wealth. The decline of the economy, failures at the front, and growing public discontent make Putin the perfect sacrificial victim for his own henchmen. Killing him inside the bunker is the only real chance for the Kremlin spiders to bargain for amnesty in the West and halt the destruction of the country.
According to the Washington Post, in recent weeks the Kremlin has faced unusually open criticism even from the financial elite. The economy shrank by 1.8% in the first 2 months of the year, due to significant intensified sanctions and the high interest rates introduced to combat inflation.
Based on the latest data from Rosstat, this is placing significant downward pressure on investments and has led to a record level of unpaid commercial bills, $109 billion in January. In a separate report, the publication further notes that the total number of companies with outstanding tax debt to the state has now risen to 439,900, according to detailed data provided by the Russian firm known as Action Accounting.
The system is devouring itself, and the leader has turned out to be the weakest and most vulnerable link. Putin can hide behind concrete walls as much as he wants, reshuffle ministers, and send out body doubles on stage, but not a single bunker will save him from a knife in the back from his own guards or associates. The clockwork mechanism has been set in motion, the elites are ready, so now we await action. And while the dictator hides behind the backs of his body doubles, NATO is already openly mocking his accusations against the Baltic states. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte issued a stern warning. If the Kremlin dares to use nuclear weapons, the West's response will be devastating. How exactly does Europe plan to permanently break the teeth of a deranged Moscow? All the details from Brussels coming up.
Russian accusations against the Baltic countries over the flight of Ukrainian drones have provoked a strong reaction from European institutions. The European Commission stated, without the war started by Moscow, there would be no problem at all. That when
it comes, as for Russian threats, they are simply unacceptable. And if we look at what just happened with the drone incursion into Lithuania, first and foremost, without Russia's aggressive war, there would be no drones violating and invading EU airspace. Therefore, the responsibility for everything that is happening rests squarely on the shoulders of Russia. For our part, we also note NATO's response to the downing of the drone. We have also seen the response from Ukraine and Estonia, and this once again shows that Russia's aggressive war has far-reaching consequences. That is why we are constantly working on further supporting Ukraine and applying pressure exactly where it is needed, namely on Russia.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen spoke out even more sharply. She warned, "Any direct threat against a member state of the European Union is a threat against the entirety of the Union, and Europe will respond with complete unity."
Russia's public threats against the Baltic countries are completely unacceptable. Let there be no doubt. A threat against one member state is a threat against the entire European Union. Russia and Belarus bear direct responsibility for the drones that threaten the lives and safety of people on our eastern flank. Europe will respond with unity and strength. We will continue to strengthen the security of our eastern flank through strong collective defense and readiness at all levels. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, on social network X.
The position of the European institutions was also supported by the NATO Secretary General. Mark Rutte called the Russian accusations absurd and reminded that it is Moscow that bears responsibility for everything happening in the region. If
these drones are coming from Ukraine, they are not there because Ukraine specifically wanted to send a drone to Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia. They are only there because of Russia's reckless, illegal, and unprovoked full-scale invasion, which began in 2022, following what they previously did in Crimea back in 2014 against the Ukrainian people. That is the fundamental reason why this is happening today.
On the 19th of May, this situation was already commented on by the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, American General Alexis Grinkevich. He went on to directly characterize the Russian accusations against the alliance's allies as a standard propaganda cliché and provided a specific argument. If NATO were really letting Ukrainian drones through the airspace over the Baltic, the Allies would certainly not be shooting them down themselves.
That's just a standard Russian cliché, isn't it? They frequently claim that NATO operates in an offensive manner. But we all know, and you can carefully examine the NATO treaty yourself. It's a defensive alliance. We do not pose any threat to Russia, and they are well aware that we do not pose a threat to Russia. If they truly considered us such a threat, they wouldn't have completely emptied out the Leningrad military district to invade Ukraine. I'm just stating things as they are, probably obvious things. Finally, I would like to note, if we allowed these drones to fly directly through the airspace of the Baltic countries to reach Russia, we certainly wouldn't be shooting them down at all.
Brussels is speaking with one voice. Russian narratives about the responsibility of the Baltic countries are being rejected as unfounded. The Allies are sending a clear signal. The pressure on Moscow will only intensify. Vitaly Sozonov, Ruslan Kuskov from Brussels for Freedom TV channel.
Meanwhile, ICV analysts have stated that Moscow hastily launched exercises specifically in order to distract attention from the rout of its army and to try to exert more pressure on the West. But the show has failed. Even the most loyal Russian war correspondents no longer believe the dictator's tales of mythical victories. Details in the report.
The Russian Ministry of Defense continues to report non-existent successes of the Russian army in the war against Ukraine to the authorities. Moreover, even so-called war correspondents who support Russian aggression accuse the ministry of lying in its fake frontline reports. For example, the Ministry of Defense reported the successful capture of the settlement of Borovaya in the Kharkiv region, even though at that time the Ukrainian armed forces had already driven the aggressor out of the village. This was reported by the largest propaganda channel. To confirm their supposed successes, the Russian military published a corresponding video. In reality, however, the video was filmed in the settlement of Kolomichika, which has long been under temporary Russian occupation. Military experts note that Russian troops need about 36 attacks to capture just 1 square kilometer of Ukrainian territory.
The Russian military occupation forces currently lack the necessary resources for their planned operations.
They currently lack the resources for the full-scale implementation of the strategic plans that their high command has meticulously conceived. However, they do possess enough capabilities to sustain a high level of pressure and constant tension along the entire length of the front line, allowing them to continue the so-called infiltration tactics they have been employing. This is precisely why Minister Fedorov is setting such an incredibly high bar and a rigorous standard regarding the urgent need to destroy and eliminate approximately 50,000 Russian occupiers every single month. If this specific rate of attrition is maintained, then in fact, within just a few short months, the entire structure of the Russian army will simply find itself unable to continue and will ultimately collapse under the pressure.
The Russian army is currently losing no fewer than 1,000 of its soldiers killed or wounded every single day. Since the beginning of 2026, the aggressor's losses have already exceeded 141,000 people. For 5 months in a row, Russia has been losing more personnel than it can mobilize, thanks to the work of Ukrainian UAVs.
Today, the security situation requires maximum unity, determination, and promptness in countering Russian aggression. Today, Ukraine is defending not only itself, we are defending the future of the entire Euro-Atlantic space. Our common goal is to create the conditions for a just peace by strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities. Oleksandr Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, on Facebook.
In the first quarter of this year, only 70,500 people signed contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense, which is about 20,000 less than planned. This was reported by the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine. To force people to go to the front, the Kremlin uses a wide range of different methods, from increasing one-time payments and paying off loans, to the strict requirement that each company send employees to the army. The State Duma has now introduced mandatory preventive work with those who refuse to perform military service into the law.
The massive losses of personnel and widespread injuries, that is, significant losses for the national economy. That is, all of this leads to the fact that sooner or later the situation will collapse, meaning it will result in some kind of breakdown.
Failures at the front, urgent military exercises, and problems with mobilization once again show Russia is weakening and losing control over the situation. Karina Lalayan for Freedom TV channel.
And while the Kremlin desperately brandishes its nuclear club, Ukraine is making a powerful diplomatic breakthrough right under Moscow's nose. Hungary's new Prime Minister, Péter Magyar, is personally traveling to Zakarpattia for a historic meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky to reset relations between Kyiv and Budapest. How does this visit and the start of new negotiations completely deprive Putin of his last chance to sow discord between our countries? Watch.
During expert-level negotiations, Ukraine and Hungary are discussing bilateral relations, the rights of national minorities, and the prospects of Ukraine joining the European Union. According to Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, Kyiv considers the protection of the rights of national minorities an important priority and is committed to adhering to European standards in this area. He emphasized that Ukraine's membership in the EU is also beneficial for Hungary itself.
I recommended viewing Ukraine's accession to the EU as a vital strategic interest for Hungary, an opportunity to strengthen Hungarian national unity, and the best possible way to ensure the rights of the Hungarian minority. I emphasized that the time has come to lay a solid foundation for opening the first negotiation cluster with the EU in May of this year and 5 more in June. My Hungarian colleague and I share one goal: to seize this moment and achieve real results. Andriy Sybiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, on social network X.
Negotiations on joining the European Union consist of 6 clusters. Every single one of these represents a field of legislation that Ukraine must bring into alignment with EU standards. Kyiv hopes to fully resolve Hungary's objections in order to open all clusters before the end of Cyprus's presidency of the European Union, that is, by June 30th. The Hungarian Minister of Foreign Affairs Anita Orban has expressed her hope that Hungarian-Ukrainian consultations at the expert level regarding the rights of the Hungarian minority could potentially mark the beginning of a new process.
Hungary, as before, supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. At the same time, within the framework of our bilateral relations, the top priority that we must address is the consistent protection of the rights of national minorities. Anita Orban, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, on social network X.
European Commissioner for Enlargement Marta Kos welcomed the cooperation between Kyiv and the new government in Budapest and expects the opening of negotiation clusters for EU accession before the summer.
Dialogue and mutual understanding are of great importance for advancing Ukraine on its European path. EU accession has repeatedly demonstrated in the past that it provides the strongest guarantees for minorities on our continent. The Commission continues to support all efforts to open all clusters with Ukraine and Moldova before the summer. Marta Kos, European Commissioner for Enlargement, on social network X.
Thus, a political compromise will be reached and a reset in relations between Kyiv and Budapest will take place, which will open a direct path for Ukraine to join the European Union. Relations between the countries have noticeably warmed after the change of government in Hungary. An additional incentive was that Budapest officially and firmly condemned the recent Russian strikes on Zakarpattia. Earlier, Anita Orban officially stated that Budapest would no longer use its veto right in the European Union as a tool of blackmail against Ukraine. This lifted the years-long blockade on Brussels' strategic decisions to support Kyiv.
Péter Magyar's strategy in this context will be focused on demonstrating through a more loyal stance toward Ukraine that he will not be as Eurosceptic a politician as Viktor Orban was. In other words, his policy is now aimed not so much at Kyiv or at Hungarian society, but rather at Brussels, because such a policy will indicate that he wants to improve and harmonize relations with the European Union in order to eliminate certain problematic factors that existed under Viktor Orban.
As reported, Brussels wants to open negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the European Union as soon as possible, which Hungary had previously blocked. In order to allocate a €90 billion loan to Ukraine, it is necessary to finalize work on 3 documents: a Memorandum of Understanding, a loan agreement, and amendments to the Ukrainian plan. Negotiations on the Memorandum of Understanding regarding macro-financial assistance in the amount of €8,350 million within the framework of the EU loan have been completed. The document was signed by the European Commissioner for Economy, Valdis Dombrovskis.
By signing the Memorandum of Understanding on macro-financial assistance to Ukraine, we are preparing to carry out the first tranche in June. This support and the related reforms will strengthen the economy, contribute to the growth of state revenues, and also help in the fight against corruption. Now the Ukrainian parliament must formally approve these reforms. which are absolutely essential for Ukraine's future integration. Valdis Dombrovskis, European Commissioner for Economy, on social network X.
Let us recall that the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, previously stated that Ukraine will receive the first tranche of the €90 billion loan as early as June. The payment will amount to about €9 billion. The first military tranche of €6 billion will be directed specifically towards drones. Victoria Chistyukina for Freedom TV channel.
What are your thoughts on this? Share opinions in the comments, leave a like, and stay updated on the news. There's more to come.